All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our fourth live discussion of the day, kicking off Decentraland Game Expo. Decentraland Game Expo, for anyone new, is a first-time event here in Decentraland, and we're really celebrating Web3 gaming and all of the innovation, the fun, and the technology that has been evolving in this space in the past few years. So we are really honored to have an amazing panel with us today, and we will be streaming in world here in Decentraland, as you can see. So if you are new to Decentraland or you're ready to jump in with us, you can just visit us at decentraland.org and download the client or jump in on browser. If you are on browser, we recommend the Opera GX browser just for the best service, as we have a really big build here going on. So welcome, everyone. We are really excited for this panel today. We have Brian Bento, who is our Chief Product and Game for Cryptomon team, Ken Anderson joining us from Tashi Gaming, and Hendrik Rootering, Head of Gaming at Sandstorm Meetup. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for the invite.
Of course. We're ready to jump in. So this is meant to be a free-flowing conversation. So we are streaming live in Decentraland, but also on LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. So if you have any comments from the community, feel free to drop them into the chat, and we will try to cover as many as we can throughout this discussion. Also, those of you that are listening in Decentraland Plaza, use the chat, and Dana will help filter them in through to us throughout. So right now our team is in the Plaza. If this is your first time there, how are you guys doing? Is anyone in Plaza able to jump in? Ken, I know I saw you.
I am.
There.
Yep. I'm looking at myself on screen in Plaza. It's wild.
I love when that happened. It feels very meta.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, we are right here and we are ready to jump in. Today's topic is, so you want to launch a Web3 game, and there's so much we can cover in this space, but I like to kick it off with a fun, easy one. What are your guys' favorite games, Web2 or Web3? When you think of just like the most fun you have in gaming, what games are you playing? I'll start with you, Hendrik.
With me? Well, yeah, I like competitive games, so I was playing a lot of League of Legends and stuff like this. So I'm really into the team match games, stuff like this. But I also played a lot of competitive, like more harder RPG style games, like Elden Ring recently, or the new DLC, which is awesome, and all the Dark Souls series, really. And yeah, so just, I don't know, I like challenges in games, but I really like all kinds. I'm not very picky, I have to say. How about
Ken,
you?
what about you?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to my mood. Web3, like I kind of fell in love with Planet Mojo a while ago, so I still love Planet Mojo in the Web3 space. In the Web2 space, it's just, again, it's whatever I feel like playing at that time. Sometimes I feel like building things, so I'm in various sandbox games like Minecraft. I play Elden Ring as well. Anytime I'm just like, I've got an hour or two to kill and I want something challenging, I'll hop into Elden Ring. And then same thing, like I'm more of an FPS competitive player, so like Call of Duty and Apex, although Apex may not be considered as competitive as some other ones. But Apex Legends and Call of Duty are kind of my go-tos for the FPSs.
Perfect. And Brian, what games do you play these days?
I grew up playing Zelda a lot, so that's kind of, I like that sort of RPG fantasy style. I also played way too much World of Warcraft when I was younger. I played pretty competitively, played in some of the BlizzCon events and stuff. So I'm a big fan of like the competitive stuff, but the FPS stuff I've just never been able to get my head around. I don't know, like I watch my kids play Fortnite and other stuff and Call of Duty and stuff, and I'm like, it doesn't resonate with me, and they just wreck me. So I'm like, I'll stick to the other stuff.
I get that. I actually loved Wii, which I know a lot of people said at a time, but I love the activeness of it, and it's pretty simple. I mean, I didn't grow up as a hardcore gamer, so like the simpler, the better. I love Tetris, Wii, Mario Kart, like all of those are kind of the world I grew up in and really enjoy playing. So some of these fairground games, I actually just played one called Neon Maze. In between the sessions, I was like, let me go in and play a game. So I just played Neon Maze in World, and that one was a ton of fun. So I feel like that's a new one I'm going to go in and keep seeing how long it takes me to get to each level. So that's awesome. I love hearing the range we see coming from this space. So I would love to jump in and just kind of get started in exploring some of the booths. I know a few of you have booths here, and I think we can kind of jump in. So maybe we'll start with you, Hendrik, and head over to the Sandstorm booth, which is at 374. So if anyone wants to join us in World, we're heading to 374.
374.
Yep, you could type it into your chat if you just do /go-to 374 and give it 1 second to load. You'll just have to walk backwards and walk forwards and you'll see it. And so, Hendrik, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and talk more about Sandstorm.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for the intro. Yeah, so my name is Hendrik. I work at Sandstorm since the really, really early days. I'd say almost 3 years now. So we've been for a long time in Web3 gaming and in that sphere. Yeah, Sandstorm. We're basically focusing on two things right now. One thing is we have a large creator marketplace, which allowed us to do basically production projects, marketing projects for companies, go-to-market strategies, and these kind of things. We worked in, both for individual game studios, but also on live service platforms, where we did a lot of UGC content creation. And yeah, just basically over the years, we just really liked exploring the space and seeing what's possible and where the users resonate. So that's really what we do on the one side. On the second side, we last year we acquired an analytics company and we developed our own analytics product, which allows to track both basically in-game actions of your players and also the actions that your potential customers have on websites and for your different traffic and campaigns. So yeah, that's basically, we have a pretty large range. So we touched on a lot of topics when it comes to helping game devs just be more successful in general throughout their journey. Yep.
Awesome. And I know you've worked with a bunch of DCL creators and content creators in that space. So how do games start to get in touch with you and start getting to be a part of that Sandstorm network?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, a lot of course, getting in touch with people. There's a lot of, outbound outreach and inbound outreach that we do. When we get in touch with people afterwards, like basically we establish a plan, generally based on their goals, what they need. And from there, we do a 6 months to 12-month strategy, and then we work it out. And that's basically how we operate with most of our customers. And always depends, of course, on the project, on the customer type, what they're looking for. But yeah, essentially that's how we worked over the past years. Back in the day, we used to do a podcast, which was pretty fun too. But we don't do that right now.
So many podcasts
run it back.
So little time.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now you get to be a guest on Panelists because you have
look
more
at that
availability.
Exactly. It's way more practical, way less to do, have to say.
Absolutely. Well, we're loving your booth. Great for the community to check it out. I know on the left there, Dana, if you scroll by, you could see all of the spaces where the Sandstorm team's social media handles are. You could jump in, learn more about them. But it's nice to see some of the different tools that are possible in Web3 games. I know, Ken, you were talking about Planet Mojo. We had the team on a space earlier today. They also have a booth at the expo. So if anyone wanted to check that out, I'm trying to remember. The Planet Mojo booth is booth B24. So if you wanted to go find that on the map, you can as well. Their booth, those characters they have are just so cute.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Ken, I'd love to hear a quick introduction from you and what's happening at Tashi Gaming.
Yeah, so we've built an ephemeral sidechain and deep in technology for gaming. You can think of it kind of being an evolution of fully on-chain gaming. We call it fully on DAG gaming, where we're actually pushing consensus into the players' machines now. So we've built a highly optimized multiplayer engine that lets game developers actually just drop the consensus engine right into the game client, and the peers connect with each other directly. So you can think of it as having no servers and no hosts. It adds a layer of fairness. There's a bunch of netcode challenges that get resolved when you have fair ordering between players of what's happening in game. And we've been working with Unity for the last year or so. We've spoken at DevCom in Germany and spoken at a few Unity dev days. And with their ECS framework, we've actually seen a lot of people come to us and go, wow, your platform, because we do have this fair ordering coming out of the consensus layer of all game events, now it just makes it so much easier to understand ECS and implement ECS to ensure that all the games stay in sync and you don't have any servers involved. So we're kind of, I think of our strategy as like taking Web3 technology and all of the things we've been doing for the last 8-9 years and deriving real value for the Web2 gamers as well. And I think that's where we start seeing the benefit of Web3 in the space, is when Web2 developers are getting value out of it and they're not adding any additional friction.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, I think there's so many different layers we can dive into, and we'll do questions for each of you. Before we do that, I want to have Brian walk us through the KMON booth. So we are going to head over there next, which is -879. So anyone that is in world with us, we are going to -879 to check out the booth from KMON.
Yeah, so we started actually off as Cryptomon company, I think 3 years ago almost. A bunch of us had come up with the idea. We really had seen sort of the benefit of like NFT usage in gaming. A bunch of folks who are sort of Pokemon lovers had seen some of the work done with CryptoKitties. And we sort of thought about coming on and building basically a game that sort of merged the concept of Pokemon with NFTs. Obviously, there were a bunch of people in the space at that time. And then basically over the course of 3 years, we sort of have evolved in terms of what we wanted to do. I basically came on board with the promise of building an MMO, something I've always wanted to do my entire life. I worked at Oracle in enterprise software development for 25 plus years. Decided to just come throw everything away, come to Web3 and chase the dream of building an amazing game. And so we are pretty close to launching our early access of World of Kogia. It's basically World of Warcraft meets Pokemon meets Zelda. So if you've ever picked up an MMO, most of the feedback we get from like ex-WoW players and Guild Wars and stuff like that is that it brings back a lot of nostalgia. But we've really sort of taken the concept of using tokens and NFTs to enhance the MMO experience. I think it's a pretty solid fit. But at the same time, most of our focus really, what we learned is on gameplay. Like our early game, we have a couple of other games that have done well, but obviously they were more focused on like the crypto aspects. And this one is really heavily focused on gameplay. We've got multiplayer dungeons, a lot of social features. I know that Decentraland has like a big community of people and there's a lot of social stuff. And I think based on the games I've played, I've seen that that's sort of really how you grow a game player base. But we definitely are super excited about it. You can see some of the clips in the background. Our last tech preview, I know that Ken, you were talking about networking and stuff. Yeah. First time I've ever tackled anything with netcode, and we wrote our entire backend off of the Unity netcode engine. So we built a bunch of custom IP and stuff to handle data synchronization. Last preview, we had 10,000 plus players, 400 people all fighting a single boss at the same time.
Congrats.
So definitely working on pushing the envelope and really focusing on gameplay. At the end of the day, I've always said to the team, we should build a game that we would play regardless of whether there was blockchain tech. And at the end of the day, the blockchain is just there to make the experience better and add some security, like you mentioned, and some reliability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the characters in your game have been so fun. Dana, when you have a minute, if you could step all the way back from the booth, I love the top of your booth, Brian, that the team had built. It looks so cool when you approach it. So Dana, if you could keep coming a little bit further so everyone could see. He's just running up there. It looks so awesome.
The Cryptomon have been like the bane of our existence. So most NFT collections start off as like a series of traits like Bored Ape, and you get like 5 or 6 different traits. All of the traits on our Cryptomon are completely random on blockchain. Some come from breeding, but obviously it's like a mishmash. And so we had to find a way to basically create an infinite combination of models that we could then take, rig them, and put them into the game, custom textures and colors and everything. And so we've come up with some pretty cool tech there that I think other folks in the industry might be interested in too. Basically allows us to generate random characters from parts based on NFT traits. So cool. We get a lot of feedback that people, it reminds them of Pokemon. We try and take like a little bit more of an adult aspect twist on them, but you get that nostalgia from if you played Pokemon games from earlier back in the days.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dana, if you could walk through, there's a really cool wearable in here. I'm giving the alpha out on these chats. I saw one. I collected it earlier, so my avatar is currently wearing it already. But if you head in on the left, there's an awesome jacket, sweatshirt, hoodie.
Yeah, it looks like a version of our trainer hoodie.
Yes, so fun.
That's also one of the things I like about Decentraland is like our first tech preview, we didn't have a lot of customization. And so it was just like the same character running around, which obviously is a little boring at times. And our last preview is the first time we did character customization, and it's just kind of cool to see all the different people, different cosmetics and stuff. It really brings sort of the world to life.
Yeah, definitely. And I know I've seen a lot of people running around with that hoodie, so I'm sure the claims will continue throughout the day. I think if we scan this room, I see a bunch of them. Yeah, already. So people have definitely gone in and gone for their search for where there's some wearable claims in here. So that's been really fun to see. I'd love to get into some general talking about how you launch a Web3 game. So as you were talking about this, I know you're coming up here on your big launch, but what were some of the most critical factors when you were deciding, okay, what type of game should we build and why?
I think from our perspective, so we started off with like an Axie type clone. Web3 gaming is interesting because a lot of times you launch assets and tokens before you have a product. And so that becomes a little bit of a challenge because you kind of have to back your way into stuff. But we started off with like kind of like what works. Like we knew Axie was pretty popular. We decided to take the concept of Pokemon and add basically RPG elements. So we have a casual mobile battler that basically teams of 3 Cryptomon. You battle people, friends. They cast spells and they have HP and stuff like that. So a little kind of mishmash still of like Zelda and that type of stuff. And then we quickly found that the engagement that you get from a massive open world is really what people are asking for in Web3. And so given the fact that I've done some work with consulting with some MMO companies in the past, and World of Warcraft was one of the top, like the games I played for a big portion of my gaming career. It felt like it was something I had to try and do. But I think there's definitely tons of opportunities. Like I think Ken and Hendrik said, like they play kind of games based on how they feel, which is kind of cool because it's like if you're in a mood and you want to play a first-person shooter or something like that, you can pick up a game. So I think there's not necessarily a right and a wrong answer to what you build. You just have to make sure it's fun to play, engaging, and is something that you know how to bring sort of a fun aspect to.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you just said. I think Web3 is, I just want to jump on one thing that you mentioned before, is that it's difficult because you're first starting with selling assets and then you're actually building out the game. And I think it's actually a really interesting complexity that there is in Web3 gaming, because typically, let's say if you would work on first of all, there's no standard framework that you can use to build a game. I think all teams have different methods, they have different pipelines, they have different approaches. Like some do content first, some do game design like hardcore first and have like a super big documentation. And some just do both at the same time, and then they pivot 1,000 times during the production process. So I don't think, first of all, there's a good approach. Now in Web3, there's like 2 things that are relevant that kind of shift the approach. first, you have two options to get essentially funding, because we have to talk about monetization and how basically you're able to fund those operations and fund the development of your game. That's like super expensive as a whole process. Like you're counting multiple 100,000, if not more, to even be able to have an MVP, right? So I think to get this first part, you have two options basically. Either you get a grant from a foundation, like from a blockchain foundation, etc., and this is difficult, but there you have to lead with having basically an outline, a complete project, etc., and this is also taking a lot of time, but then you have to put more work into game design. Or second, basically you're trying to fundraise from your community, essentially, through selling assets and playing on speculation. And there's a lot of different strategies there, right? Because in Web3, those are the types of funding. In Web2, you would do like standard fundraising, which has also its problems, or you would do like investor funded stuff, or you would bootstrap, essentially. So, I mean, these are the differences. And I think if you do in Web3 and you do assets first, you are tied to keep the hype of your community going, because that's where you get your revenue from. So essentially, you're kind of forced to do content first, even though maybe you have to work on dev work and design first, on game design first. And this balance that is really difficult to hold, especially when it comes to like 1 year or 2 year process. So I think it's actually like a real issue in Web3, and why a lot of games are kind of, either lacking on one end or on the other, and it's tough to put it together. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think most people even realize that the average game, like even a relatively casual game, is like a 3-year runway on development. Yeah. Like it's not a quick thing. You just promise a game and 6 months later you turn around and you have this AAA title. It takes time to build the frameworks and the technology to build these solid games. And so, like you said, the challenge is how do you kind of navigate that period of time where you don't have a full-fledged game but you've sort of promised stuff to your community. We did a lot with tech previews. Like every few months we'd showcase like the work that we were doing. So we've had like 4 or 5 tech previews. And I've always been sort of a proponent of sort of testing and user-driven design. And so we use them selfishly to also test the game. So like you're not going to launch an MMO on day one with no testing. So we've had thousands, 20, 30, 40,000 people playing our game over the course of the last like 12 to 18 months, testing and giving us feedback and things like that. So I think anyone looking to launch a game, you definitely want to take a very iterative approach and just kind of deliver on bits and pieces and find ways to use what you've actually built and make it more engaging to your community while you're building your game.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken, do you want to add to that? I know with your ecosystem, there's a lot that can happen in terms of how you get ready to build a game.
Yeah, well, I mean, Brian said some things that I think really struck a chord with me. Like when we were taking our technology into the Web 2 space, a lot of the Web 2 games have like a 6-year cycle on development. So, it might take 3 years to get to market, but they're not thinking about anything for the next 6 years except for what they've already decided on. It's a big endeavor. I think anybody who's thinking of getting into the space and building games needs to maybe go work for a game dev company first and understand what it takes to get these things published, or at least in the industry. But I think there's a lesson that Hendrik brought up that kind of struck a chord with me as well. I spent my first 4 years from 2017 until 2021 building like crazy, incredible Web3 tech and courting enterprises. And then after I left there, I thought, okay, well, the enterprises are slow to adopt. I already know that we've got 3-year runway for any enterprise to pick it up. But something that didn't really click until afterward was the importance of community. So it was about 2021 when I was just like, oh, wait a second, I'm totally missing one of the critical points, one of the main points of this entire Web3 experience. It's not just about sovereignty and ownership, but it really is about that community. And so I really like how Brian does his tech reviews and testing. I was just recently working with a project that had a very successful Kickstarter in the Web2 space. And the number one factor for its success was the founders' engagement with the community and building right alongside the community. And I think Web3 does a really great job of you're tokenizing it, you're codifying that community building, right? And you're creating emotional and financial incentives to align around this project. And I think on the one side, especially in gaming, knowing that it's going to take a while, on the one side, you might have lulls of activity, but in those times, that's when you can kind of lean into the community and kind of lean into the token side of it and really continue that hype, keep the interest of your community in those lulls. So I think it's a really cool mechanism to really keep engaging your community the whole time when you're building and when you're testing with them, and when they're not testing and they're just holding tokens and trading and whatever you're doing to engage your community. You've got all these mechanisms to do that in the Web3 space that is a lot harder to do in the Web2 space.
Yeah, totally. On a space earlier today, we were talking about what makes a Web3 game fun was the title of that one. And we talked a lot about the ability to get user feedback kind of early and often in Web3 gaming, because community is so integral to what everyone is building. I'd love to hear kind of, as you all are part of the building phase of getting games up and running, you're on the back end, like, how do you work with founders or as a founder yourself, like how do you work on integrating that feedback early as you're preparing launch to then ensure you're building something the community is excited about? Whoever wants to tackle it, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the Pink Moon Studios side, we did, like I said, a lot of sort of iterative design. We also have taken a little bit different approach. I admittedly haven't done a full, like a ton of game development during my career. I've mostly consulted on like esports design and PvP design with some of the other MMOs I worked with. But what we've sort of done is built an engine, which I think is one of those things that you'll find the really successful platforms and games do, because when you build an engine, you don't necessarily build game content. You're basically building a way to build content. So we have our, maybe if you follow our socials, see that we have our own proprietary engine that handles not only like the complex networking that you get with MMOs, but it also allows us to build quests or dialogue or storyline items and everything on the fly. So like in our last tech preview was about 14 days worth of content, and it took us about 3 days to build. With no code. It was basically just text files. And so I think it's important when you're going to actually build your game, you sort of think about those things, like how do you build it in a way that you can quickly adapt, because we're in an industry that just changes so rapidly, whether it's a blockchain that becomes hot, like other blockchains like Ronin and stuff. Like you're just constantly at the mercy of an early young industry where things and standards are changing. And so you really have to position yourself when you're building a game to be able to shift and change those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being able to take that feedback early and know you're building something everyone is interested in and excited about allows you to be ready for launch and have those advocates in your community ready to help you share it with the world as you get started. I know for Decentraland, we're working on an updated client. And so having those alpha sessions and those test sessions with our community is such a great way to get everyone fully on board and ready for what's to come. If you're in world, just a quick check-in for anyone that may have joined us late. We are inside Decentraland at the Game Expo. The stream here, we are walking around the plaza, looking at all of the amazing booths. There are 25 different exhibitors and games that you can go check out. So that's what we are doing here on stream. And we are joined by the Ken from Tashi, Hendrik from Sandstorm, and we have Brian from the KMON team. So we are diving in and talking about all that is needed behind launching a Web3 game. I want to pivot to talk a little bit more about the technical side of things. What are some of the most significant challenges in launching a Web3 game, like so specifically on the blockchain? One of the things we've talked about in some of our earlier panels today is like, no matter what you're building, it has to be fun, number one. So whether it's Web2, Web3, mobile, doesn't matter. Like the game has to be fun. But from a technical side, adding blockchain is obviously an additional layer of complexity. So would love to hear from some of you about those technical challenges and how you can work together and some of the products you're using help you overcome those. So I'm going to start with Hendrik.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not the most qualified to talk about like very, very technical stuff. My focus was mainly on go-to-market strategies, production, and that side of things, where of course we're tied to technical elements, but we're not actually working on the back-end side. But it is true that when it comes to technical implementation of blockchains, first, even when you think about the assets that you want to sell, you need to think, okay, not only how can I integrate my game into a specific blockchain, but what is also the best blockchain that has the biggest community that I can reach, and where can I actually not basically shoot myself in the foot because I'm deciding on one platform to build on, and then that platform basically doesn't provide enough support, or isn't really like helpful in the development process, or doesn't really provide the advantage that we talked about in Web3, right? So this is the first thing. And then the second thing is on a product perspective, what blockchain elements do you actually want to include? Do you want to have an asset marketplace, NFT marketplace? Do you want to integrate that? How do you want to have your server solutions going? Do you want it to be decentralized, centralized? What does that mean? How does it work? And all these different questions are basically other complexities that come with the baseline of all of this. Yeah. So if you guys want to go on the more technical aspect, feel free to jump in.
I feel like even at a high level, we need this like checklist of start here and go through and get more complex over time. But I will pass it to you, Brian. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so like I've been in tech for a long time. I've seen a lot of like different techs come and go. I'll date myself. I was working during the .com bubble. So I've seen a lot of stuff. And it's very interesting to see the same thing happen over and over again, where people try and apply a technology to places where it shouldn't be. And so I think one of the things that's super important for gaming in particular is to really think about like what's the value add when it comes to adding more technology, right? And so am I just doing this to say I was a blockchain company, or that I have blockchain integration? If so, it's maybe not the right thing to do strategically. Whereas the concept of NFTs for ownership of assets, tokens replacing the funny money that's on the app stores, like those types of things, those seem to add some value and make a lot of sense when you're trying to push forward and disrupt an industry. But I think there's still we're still in our infancy in terms of technology. But what I think someone had mentioned something about friction earlier, but like friction is the one thing that is like the primary focus of everything that we look at from a technology perspective. Most people on this planet, of the whatever billion gamers there are not going to care that it's a blockchain game at the end of the day. They're mostly concerned with, is the game fun? Can I get in and play quickly? And so our job as Web3 developers to really push the envelope and bring Web3 mainstream is to reduce that friction and make it feel like the person can just fire up their PC, hop on their mobile device and start playing a game without having to worry about a million different wallets and other things like that. And so those are the types of things from a tech perspective we really focus on. Like we have an in-game wallet that's through one of our partners, Magic, that just makes it easy. You just basically create an email, use your email, and it creates a wallet for you. And so like those types of things are sort of going to be very important as the Web3 gaming industry expands. But at the end of the day, like the technology is something you have to learn as a developer. It was relatively new to me, but most of us in tech are pretty used to learning new stuff. But I think from my perspective, when I look at something, I really look at like what value is it adding? Are the players asking for this? I think is the other big thing, right? Is do the players even care that we have a marketplace? Do they care that they have NFTs, that type of stuff? So I think from our perspective, that's what we've been focusing on, and like reducing friction. So having as much in-game as possible. So I think during the first iteration of Web3 games, there was a lot of stuff that was built out on the web, websites, different stuff like that it does add friction, because if you're in a game on mobile and you want to go to a website to buy something or to look at a marketplace, it's not the best experience from a player perspective. So doing more in apps, whether it's a marketplace or like having streaming tools and stuff like that, I think those are the types of things that are important for us when we're looking at technology in Web3 games.
Yeah, I'm going to add my vote to what both Hendrik and Brian said. I first of all, the friction part, and we can't add any friction. I always talk about, it's like the Hippocratic Oath of Web3, of like, do no harm, like add no friction, right? So
I love that. Add no friction. I bring it up in all my meetings moving forward.
and I'm in the same boat as Brian. Like you know, I remember walking into Boeing's office, and they had 3 use cases for the network that I was trying to convince them to use. And I remember sitting there and talking them out of all 3 use cases, because I'm just like, we're not adding any value here, guys. You can do all that with databases and APIs.
Yeah.
And so understanding where that is, I know for us, that's been the core of our entire life as Tashi is. We're looking at the Web 2 gaming space and going, what in the Web 2 gaming space can we improve with Web 3 tech? We wrote our own consensus engine, which I think allows us to do some things that not anybody else really can do. But one of the big pain points, we were talking to one of the top mobile game developers in the world, and they were saying that up to 40% of their entire revenue goes out to network egress cost because they've got very little revenue coming in from their players. And what money is coming in from players, they've got all that free network they have to support. And we walked in and did just a quick little analysis and figured that we could potentially save them as much as 60% of that total cost, just coming right off the top. And we were thinking, okay, I think we found something we can add value in this space with by using this consensus engine for multiplayer games. And that was kind of the start of Tashi, was when we saw potentially, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of network egress cost savings for these publishers. And we thought, okay, there's definitely a market for that. So, and then everything else we've built has kind of been like, how do we improve on that? So, you know, in multiplayer gaming, peers can't always see each other. So we have to have some type of proxy relay. Well, perfect candidate for DPIN. If you hide all of that behind the SDK, the game developers just know that they're integrating multiplayer, and you build it, you help them figure out how to build the architecture of their netcode. All they know is that they're playing multiplayer, and somehow magically all their players are able to see each other and play with each other without having servers and stuff like that. Now, Brian's case in MMOs are a little bit trickier. I'm talking like, you know,
That's
up to
the server
players.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a different challenge, although
Yeah,
I did not know it when I first started. But MMOs are, I mean, one thing I will say, like, there's an adage in gaming, like, when you first graduate as a game dev, they're like, everyone wants to build an MMO, but you should not. And I'm learning that pretty quickly. Like, it is, I have a lot of experience in tech, and it is a challenge. Like, almost like we see a lot of our competitors talk about how they're going to add multiplayer to their game. They're going to take their RPG and make it an MMO. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, every single line of code that we have ever written is focused on network optimization. Like, you're not going to take your RPG and just add an MMO to it. Like, we literally have spent 2.5 years just focused on network optimization and figuring out how do you take 10,000 players, put them in a space, and not have everything crash. So, but to be honest, like the consensus engine, so like our other game, our mobile battler game, the like some sort of consensus engine on chain would be awesome. Like that type of stuff, we're not paying Microsoft our hosting fees for our servers constantly, and everything's on chain is kind of a cool concept for blockchain games that don't have like real-time requirements or have sort of lesser requirements from a network perspective. So it's kind of cool to see people pushing the envelope and really solving actual tech problems from Web 2.
Well, we hit a milestone in November and hit 1 million TPS in one consensus session. And when we were optimizing for latency, we were as low as 30 milliseconds in latency. So for most games, that works actually okay. Yeah. Maybe even like a battler would work. FPS, maybe not so much. Some of your twitchy games, then I just lean into the netcode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, the add no friction is probably the number one point. And I think the other point is like, if you're going to launch a game, go to where your audience is. And I think that kind of tacks on to both what Hendrik and Brian were saying. You know, we were looking at this originally, our consensus engine is written in Rust. We thought, amazing, we'll go like integrate with Bevy, right? Because Bevy is a Rust-based gaming engine. Well, Bevy doesn't have an IDE or an editor. Bevy doesn't have a massive community. Like, who's going to pick up our game engine, right? And so we did plenty of analysis, and we figured out, you know, what direction we want to go with. Maybe Godot, right? Maybe we'll go with Godot. But even then, like, the actual audience that would benefit from our technology was not nearly as big as both Unreal and Unity. And really, frankly, Unity, because Unity is going the ECS route with their code stack and their new Dots framework. And so we found like a really good pairing of Unity. Plus, Unity is what the vast majority of Web3 developers are building their technology and their games in. And so it was, at first, I wouldn't say it was a no-brainer. It took a lot of analysis because on one side, if we were to integrate with Bevy, it'd be a simple plugin. It would take us a few months to build that SDK and we'd be golden. Instead, we've spent the last year and a half building the Unity SDK, which is great because now we're in a position where we actually have a Unity SDK and we're starting to tap into that ecosystem that is very robust. We have plenty of people to talk to. So,
yeah, I think we've been toying with that as well, like what engine to build on, how that's working. So the Decentraland Foundation is currently being fully rebuilt on Unity, but we also have a community grant because we're a DAO. Where there is a separate team also building on Bevy and Godot for like a mobile version, which is super interesting just to see how all of the different tech stacks can kind of come together. For us, we're open source and decentralized, so anyone can make Decentraland kind of however they want to, which is a really cool way to see how that can come to fruition across very different platforms and tech stacks. Would love to hear from all of you. I know I've heard Magic from you, Brian. We use them as well as our social login. So for anyone that's interested in Decentraland, you can log into Decentraland with just your X account, your Gmail, whatever social you want to use. And that's all powered by Magic on the back end, creating a Web3 wallet. So that was one of the hurdles we were facing in terms of getting people onboarded into Decentraland of, oh, I don't want to deal with a wallet and the crypto and all of that, but I really want the wearables. So we're like, okay, how can we make it super easy if people want to come in? They're not super Web3 friendly yet, but they can come in and at least claim all the wearables. If they haven't figured out how to transfer stuff, that's fine. That can happen later, or self-custody later. But having that be a super easy piece of the tech stack is helpful. So I'd love to hear from you guys, like, what are some of the tech stacks you're seeing behind some of the Web3 games and that you recommend people kind of checking out as a whole?
I can think of one that I recently talked to. It's called Stardust. I think it was pretty cool, the solutions that they provided and that they have. So yeah, that's what I was thinking about in terms of like onboarding and wallet creation. You also have Venly, I think, but I don't know if they have I didn't check if they have like a complete tech stack for game devs and if it goes further. But yeah, I think those two are also a good option alongside from Magic. But yeah, those would be like some cool suggestions to look into, I guess.
Anything else you're partnering with, Brian, that you recommend as people are looking to build? I think we have some game developers watching. So if you're looking, what kind of companies should you be looking at? What tech stack should you be considering?
Yeah, I mean, we use Magic to reduce that friction. We also use the graph for indexing. Because obviously, like anyone who comes from a traditional tech background, like databases are super easy to work with, but the blockchain can be complicated at times to get the data that you're looking for. You also have latency issues with reading and transactions and stuff like that. So we've been using the graph for quite some time for data indexing. They also have some really cool stuff coming with like Firehose for data injection that we'll probably take a look at. We also did a partnership with Chainlink. So they do a lot with like, we're using CCIP for cross-chain stuff, which we definitely had a great experience with them. So if you're looking to do anything cross-chain, safely bridging assets or migration, stuff like that, CCIP was a huge help to us, and it was pretty easy to use. Other than that, we use like a lot of the basic libraries. We do a lot of development in-house, unless a third party sort of has a great track record. And we can make sure like the tech is there, like, because all of the tech's super early. So you don't want to sort of tie your entire game to some specific tech only to have it fall apart. We do a fair amount of development in-house with like Ethereum and stuff. But for the most part, like you can find some big vendors like Chainlink and the Graph and folks like that definitely can add to your ecosystem if you have those requirements. But I think the biggest thing that we've found is like sometimes it's hard to find stuff. We use Unity. And we sometimes find it hard to find libraries that are good that are developed for Unity, which is why we went with Magic, because they were super supportive of the Unity. But I think there's a few others out there. And we've had some conversations with ChainSafe. They have a pretty good stack that's related to, like, they have some wallet stuff, they have some transaction aggregation, some stuff for gasless transactions. I think when you talk about friction, like, those are the types of things where you start to find the tech that's important. So Gelato is a company that we've been slowly working on to add gasless stuff, where if you're on like Polygon like we are, you don't necessarily want your users to have to go and buy Matic if they want to buy stuff from your shop. So we do a lot of gasless sponsored transactions in the future to sort of help reduce that stuff. And then a bunch of the tech we're building ourselves. Like I mentioned, we're building a minting framework. So I had mentioned sort of, if you only want to sort of take the things that people really want at the time and turn them into assets on chain, because it can get expensive. And so we have this concept of minting of in-game assets to NFTs that allow you to take self-custody and then trade them on open marketplaces and stuff like that. So a lot of our game items you would get in-game as regular game items, and then you can mint them to NFTs on chain if you want to take them and move them to an external wallet or something like that.
Really cool. Yeah, one of the things when we say remove friction for us is we integrated with Word, so we could have credit card payments for our marketplace too. So I know there's a ton of different partners like that out there, but just being able to meet people where they are. I joke all the time that I'm a marketer, so I love the marketing side of it, but there was an amazing news segment back in the day of Burger King offered the first time you could use a credit card to buy fries and something at Burger King, and everyone was like, no one will do that. And they did, obviously. As we know today, I don't carry cash.
So when can we buy a burger in Mana?
I know. Well, we did have a Domino's pizza order that the teams from Last Slice in our community ordered Domino's.
Look at that.
So you never know. I mean, it's all evolving so fast. But I think just finding ways.
It'll be one of those things that just happens. Like, we'll wake up one morning and you'll be using Ethereum and Bitcoin and other currencies, and it'll just auto swap for you, and you go scan your phone at Dunkin' Donuts and get a coffee. You won't know the difference. Like, it'll just be like you wake up like it's not another day.
Exactly. We were just in Argentina for our community summit, and there's a cafe there that just takes crypto. So it's only awesome. Crypto payments. Argentina is a very crypto friendly area. But it was so cool to see, and being able to see how quickly some areas are adopting this technology and removing the friction and making it easy is what we're all looking for. So I'm excited to see that all come into the Web3 gaming world for sure. I know we're close on time. We have about 15 more minutes. So we have some more questions here I would love to jump into. But one, we've been talking about where we're at today. I would love to talk about these future trends. If you had to do, a hot take or a prediction, where do you think the future of Web3 gaming is going? Ken, I'll start with you. I know nothing like a hard one, but
just put me on the spot. I'll give the other two guys a chance to think a little bit. But I'm kind of I don't want to say a Web3 purist. Like I love the ethos in Web3 of like self-sovereignty, of actually, where you can't control what you own, then you kind of distribute that effort or that work to a group of participants that are difficult to compromise. So it's like either I hold it and I control what I own, or I farm it out to a protocol that's hard to compromise, instead of trusting any one party with my stuff. And so key management is, I think, one of the biggest friction points out there. And maybe I'm spilling the beans a little bit, but there's this project called Decentralized Recovery, DREC, that Algorand and Hedera and I can't remember who else is part of that. Ripple. So Ripple, Algorand, and Hedera are working on. But the idea is that it's kind of like the social key recovery, social MPC type key recovery that we've been talking about for years. And I think gaming is the perfect place for it, because in what other industry do you already have a list of friends and connections? Like, how cool would it be just to be able to just go, I trust this person, I trust this person, I trust this person, and then I never have to manage keys again, right? It's just your friends list is what helps you manage your key, recover and sign transactions and stuff like that. So that DREC protocol is something I'm really looking forward to. And I think in the gaming space is going to push us, because, right now, as much as I love Magic because it takes away the friction, it also kind of slightly violates the ethos of Web3. And it's the same with the graph, right? All these tools we have because we need them to meet a specific consumer requirement. But I see some of those patterns starting to become more decentralized, whether it's with zero knowledge proofs or MPC or some other of those types of protocols. We're starting to see those things come out. Brian's itching to say something.
Yeah, no, I've been in crypto for a while, so I'm a crypto maxi too. And I like sort of the direction that, like you said, some of it's a sort of short-term necessary evil, but like folks like the graph are moving to a decentralized model. And so like, I think the industry as a whole is going to start to slowly shift that way. It's natural when you first are starting to build things, I think, to feel like you need control over the early portions of it. So that way you can kind of set things up to be successful. But I think over time, we'll see a lot more of like the decentralization, hopefully, that you were talking about. I think in the gaming side, I think gaming is a natural extension. Besides DeFi, I think it's one of the primary natural extensions to the use of the blockchain. Like I just see so many places where it makes sense to take existing Web2 concepts and put them on chain. And so I think we've seen sort of a little bit of a shift. I think most of you probably have been around for, I think you said, a couple of years. Early Web2 sentiment against Web3 gaming was pretty bad. Like we had a lot of hate on a lot of socials, and it was just not a pretty place to be. I think that's been tempered a little bit, but I think what we're looking at in gaming is we're looking for one big game to go huge that everyone in the world wants to play. Something like a Fortnite, something like a Minecraft, something that no one cares about the tech. They just like, this game is awesome. And people will realize that there is some value there. And I think Web3 gaming will become something where you don't even look for it. Like it's just expected from game developers over time. People will be less inclined to play games where they can't self-custody their assets, or they buy gems from you and there's no way you can recover them, or you have no way to get rid of them if you don't want to use them anymore. I always joke that my kids spend like half my paycheck on wearables in their games that they play, like Fortnite and Roblox. I'm like, they don't even own any of that stuff, and the company could just take it away or turn it off, and like they can't share it with their friends if their friends want it. Like there's just so many pieces to the tech that solve a lot of the challenges that I think that gamers feel like they have. And historically, I think a lot of the gaming companies have ruled with an iron fist, probably because of the fact that they can. But I think we'll slowly start to see more inroads with Web3 gaming. There'll probably be one huge game, and then there'll be just a massive explosion of investment into the space, I think. And hopefully that happens in the next couple of years, and we'll all just be sitting there enjoying the fact that everyone's is playing our games.
Yeah. And I think you're right with that shift from like the necessary centralization to the decentralization. We see that with this entire DPIN movement that's going on right now of like, we've had DPIN for a while, right? We've had IPFS, like that's DPIN. But I think what we're going to see is a big focus on that. And I know that's one of the things we're doing in our DPIN strategy is like when you need proxy relays, we'll have resource nodes that do that. When you need to have matchmaking or lobby services or failover consensus nodes, like those all become just DPIN resources. Nobody knows or cares that they exist. Somebody's just leaving their game client on, and it's doing that in the background, and they're getting compensated in tokens they can now use to buy new games or buy those cosmetics that you need. So we are kind of seeing a lot of that shift, which is what I'm really excited about that movement, which is where we're at right now. And I had another point and I totally forgot. So Hendrik, why don't you go ahead and maybe I'll remember what it is.
Yeah, of course I can add maybe another perspective to this. I think, like you said before, we're really all kind of waiting for this one game to break out. I think this is kind of the feeling of the entire industry. And I also think that this breakout, quote unquote, we talked before about 3-year to 6-year development pipelines and like how long it actually takes to make a good game. We are about to get to that time where it's actually getting there, and it will maybe happen. Maybe it's one of your games. I hope so that's the case. But yeah, I think not only will the unlock be on the game side because it's just a good game, there's a lot of players, etc., and therefore, if they have like in-game transaction or in-game sales, they will, do very well and be able to continue their funding and continue their operations. But also, I think there's the second thing that we saw a lot in the early days with the entire hype around like metaverse, etc., where we saw that there were, a lot of individuals and brands that got involved, etc., which I don't necessarily think is always a good thing. But to take it to another level, I really believe that, for instance, having a model where you have assets that are able to be used in multiple games are super valuable, especially when it comes to streamers. So, for instance, I don't know if you guys know, but at the moment, I think in Web2 sales, streamers are a massive driver of sales in games. I mean, basically, if your game is streamable, you're 10xing your sales essentially. And if there's like some form of virality, it's just massive, and it can make a game from one day to another. We saw a lot of indie like kind of breakouts in the past few years just because of that feature. And when we think about this, right, and we think about how the games are being monetized and what's happening, and also when we think about the Fortnite model, which had a lot of skins, a lot of partnerships, a lot of stuff like this. If we apply Web3, or we find a way to create those form of decentralized 3D assets, which is an entire other complexity and an entire challenge as of itself. But if we create a way to be able to integrate one asset that's created for the purpose of a streamer, or for the purpose of one company or one specific theme, or even an NFT collection, whatever, if we find a way to integrate it in multiple places at the same time, and all are great games, and maybe that leads to whitelist, early access, be able to test, etc., it just benefits the entire ecosystem as a whole, because this is actually really powerful. We're talking about users, but realistically, every holder of every asset is a user. And when we look at those NFT communities, there are some that have really a big pull. I mean, I think if you just look at the Sappy Seals community, for instance, to talk about NFTs, they have a lot of active users that are actually like playing those different games and going into those spaces. And I think this is a good like case study and example of seeing those things happen. And if we look at a broader scale where it's a bit more adopted, it's more seamless, like people just don't think about it and they just want to be involved with their favorite streamer or whatever, with like whitelisted, gate kept events, etc., there will be a lot of very fun stuff that we can do on all of those platforms. So that's maybe my personal take and like on the future, but I think this is actually a really big thing that should not be understated.
Yeah, that portability of assets is something we've talked a lot about. So we started off with a single game and then started looking at like, what does it mean to be a game franchise? And I've played a bunch of RPGs that have had multiple like iterations, and you always reset. And so it's been one of the things we've been looking at is how do we take assets earned in one of our games and move them and allow them to be used in other games. So like our current mobile game, there's a few NFTs that you hold that like help you level up quicker. When our MMO drops, those same assets are functional in the new game, and they help you level up faster there. We have armor and things like that, and other assets that are portable. But I think like what you mentioned, being able to port across platforms and across games is something that's super interesting, because it adds more credence to the value concept of ownership. So like you're no longer just buying an asset, you're investing in something you can use in multiple games. Like our Cryptomon are used in all of our games. And so like you buy a good Cryptomon to play one game, you can then go play our MMO. I have dreams of making like a Mario Kart like style How to Train Your Dragon game with them, where like they fly around and race. Like that concept of being able to take the portability of assets between games and not feeling like, if you look at like the way current Web2 games think about their monetization, they basically look to build a new game to sell you new stuff. Like that's their revenue model. They're pumping out content to build new, to charge you and make you buy new things. So one of the things we're looking into is using a subscription model that would give you access to like a bunch of platforms of games, where you can just basically pay a single monthly fee and your assets are available in all the different games. I've always, like I tell my community, I don't really want to sell them stuff. I just want to build a game that we all can play and that's fun. Like the fact that I have to sell stuff kind of sucks, actually. Like I don't really want to have to, but we're obviously all a business. But at the same time, I think there have been games that have been successful with a subscription type model. Our subscriptions are going to potentially be NFTs, so those could potentially give you access to other things. It's just kind of an interesting way to start playing around with the portability concept. But I think that's like you said, is what we need to do as an industry to really show why it's important to use these technologies and not just use the blockchain as a different type of database at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I love this. We don't really want to sell you stuff. We talk about that all the time. And one of my favorite parts about playing in Decentraland is that the selling is coming from creators versus us necessarily. Like all the emotes, like this one here, we created, but that one's for free. But the community is able to do that, and being able to use the blockchain to say, if you buy something from a community member, a creator, they get royalties over time. And that's such a great way to build an ecosystem behind gaming that I know we've seen a ton throughout the event. I have one pinned that I'm going to be buying later, this like floaty game chair that I'm so excited about. And I think the opportunity there where we can have gamers and creators all coming together and making money together, selling things to one another that they're interested in, and hopefully over time can bring somewhere else, will be a lot of fun for us in Decentraland. All of the wearables and the avatars are VRM compatible, so you can bring them into OnCyber or Nifty Island or anyone that has a VRM import. So I think we're getting closer, but we have obviously a long, long way to go in terms of that interoperability. But that's where the North Star is for kind of all of us. And I think that's exciting. I know we're at time, and we could obviously just keep going on all of this. So I would love to wrap up with one short, if you can, piece of advice for someone that is looking to build a Web3 game. So if we could wrap on that, give everyone a little bit of advice, and then we can jump into the Decentraland opening party, which will be starting in a few minutes right in the plaza. I'll kick it off to you, Brian. What's the one piece of advice you'd give someone to build a Web3 game?
I think the biggest thing is really to love your players. I think if you don't want to do right by everybody, like no matter what you do, I think in anything that you do, you just need to basically really feel like a responsibility for the people that are playing your games or using your products, and then build like a collaborative community.
Awesome. Love it. Ken?
I'm going to say add no friction.
Love it.
Every time you think about integrating some Web3 tech or building something, even Web2 or Web3, I don't care what it is, but I would just say add no friction.
I'm getting that plastered.
Hendrik.
Yeah, Hendrik, go ahead.
And I would say narrow your focus, actually. I think, to iterate on what was said before, it's really important to have one direction. You can dream big, but you also have to get to a finished product. And that takes time, and you need feedback. So keep it narrow and focus on your goal.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate you bringing your expertise to the Game Expo this year. And for everyone listening, thank you. We're at 1,000 viewers as we're talking. So I really appreciate everyone coming, learning, working together to build more in this space. We are now going to switch the in-world stream over to an amazing DJ party. So we will do that as soon as we are done. And meet us in world 081. I am going to go get my outfit ready and jump on into the chat. I hope to see you all there soon. And thank you again for coming to this live discussion for the Game Expo. Have a great day, everyone. See you in world.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.